Namaste and greetings. I, Priyanka Negi, a researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. Today marks the second day of Understanding the Nuances of Climate Change in the Indian Subcontinent, Impact and Way Forward, an online international monsoon school program, a 6-week immersive online introductory certificate training course. This program is organized by IMPRI, Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development. The conveners for the program from IMPRI are Dr. Simi Mehta and Dr. Arjun Kumar. Before we start today's session, I would like to announce the housekeeping rules. It is imperative that you join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making general comments in the question to save the time. Our theme for day 2 is Climate Change Assessment and Economic Impact. Sessions for today include Climate Change and Economic Opportunities in South Asia by Professor Joyashree Roy. G. Climate Change and its Implication for the Economy in Pakistan by Dr. Jabir Syed G. Climate Change Assessment and Economic Impacts by Professor Rekha Nianthi G. Now, without any further ado, let us start the program. For our first session today, I am delighted to invite Professor Joyashree Roy Ji, Bangabandhu Chair Professor and Director, Center on South in Southeast Asia, Multidisciplinary Applied Research Network on Transforming Societies of Global South, AIT School of Environment, Resources and Development, Thailand. Professor Joyashree Roy Ji's topic for this session is Climate Change and Economic Opportunities in South Asia. Thank you for joining us today, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for your introduction and thanks for inviting me for the program. So what I'll do is that I will start sharing my screen so that I can start from there itself. Hopefully, sorry. Hold on for a minute. I need to see the slide. Yeah, it always happens, huh? So let me see. Let me try again. Yeah. I think you can see it, right? Yeah.
Perfect, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to look into climate change and the economic opportunities in South Asia, because I feel that this gives us an opportunity to rethink our development models and how we progress further. So the conceptual framework that I'm considering is that what we need to understand is that now the economics has also expanded a lot and has changed. And where it is said that we need to talk about just not one kind of capital investment, that means to building roads, etc., which are called the physical capital. But it says that we need to make genuine investment, which means that there has to be 5 kinds of capital investment. And these 5 kinds of capitals are physical capital, human capital, social capital, natural capital, and knowledge capital. And once a country balances these capital investment, it can enhance its well-being. Because we also need to understand that this disaster and climate change gives negative push to the human well-being unless we make our capitals resilient. And how do you make this capital resilient is really important issue when we are talking about the climate change, and what are these new opportunities to make them resilient. So what I just want to say is that globally, there are different operational frameworks which are coming up, and all the countries are participating, including countries from South Asia also. And as we all know, there was Millennium Development Goal, there was Sustainable Development Goal, there were the Sendai Framework, and also the COP21, where United Nations Framework on Climate Change has also given some ways and means how you can protect your the 5 capitals and how you can progress with genuine investment. So with this framework in mind, what I want to say is that in the South Asia, we must keep in mind that we have a very fast growing economies, and which we should accept, right? Because we will be growing now, given our population's well-being need to increase. And from that point of view, we need to look for these new investment opportunities and priorities so that we can meet our developmental priorities while reducing the greenhouse gases and also building resilience. So we are saying that we need to have triple win when we are deciding on any developmental project. And the IPCC 6 assessment report showed that there are number of opportunities in all these sectors: energy sector, land use sector, industry, urban, settlement design, buildings, transport, and also how we provide the services to meet the demand. All these can actually lead to globally half of the emission by 2030. So we need to see how these activities are going to lead to developmental advancement also from our country's point of view. What I always say is that we need to understand that the market realities are also changing. So as an economic investor or economic project developer, we need to keep in mind that how the different energy are becoming relatively costlier and cheaper. If you think of solar PV, the prices are now below even all the other kind of fossil fuel based and all other kind of energy providing service providing sources. So also what we need to understand is that if we look into this, it's just not the photovoltaics, but the onshore wind price is also declining. This shows how prices are declining, how the market cost for the batteries for electric vehicles are also changing. So these are all new businesses, new economic opportunities that we need to jump in to take the first movers advantage in the market. So what we also say is that it's not about thinking only demand side, but also we need to think of supply side solutions, because there are multiple opportunities which we have identified in the last IPCC report, where we have shown how, say, in the energy supply sector, in land and water food sector, what are the different options? So these are the different options: solar, wind, fossil fuel with carbon capture and storage, geothermal and hydropower. So there are all these things are listed here. Say, for example, in the human settlements, you can think in terms of efficient buildings, starting with the building codes. So there are all these different mitigation measures and various adaptation measures along these different sectors have also been identified. And we have also identified how they compare in terms of costs, because as an economic decision maker, we always need to see how we can have a least cost option so that the benefit is maximum. So I'm not going in details of this, because these are all downloadable from the web and you can see also, but you can come back during the question answer session as well. So what we are saying is that it is not only, we should not only talk in terms of energy supply sector decarbonization. We should talk about multiple sectoral activities which can happen in the energy demand and services sector. Say, for example, as I said, in the industry sector, in household sector, in building sector, in transport sector, in human settlements, so that we have seen that globally, there are 40 to 70% emission reduction potential. So what it means is that, say, for example, when these countries in South Asia, we are going to urbanize more, we are going to build new human settlements, we can see that how we can integrate these things so that we will be growing faster, but also with less emissions, so that later on we do not carry the burden of emission reduction like what in the past many decades, many developed countries had made mistakes. So what we are saying is that what we need is a kind of combination of actions. It's just not one action, but it has to be across all sectors and various combination of actions that need to be implemented. Because we have shown that, say, for example, in the food sector, if you want to maintain your nutrition level for the people, but if you reduce your food waste, there are several ways how you can reduce food waste. We have identified 92 ways how you can reduce the food waste, and we have published these also, and these are all which have been implemented on the ground in different countries. Then we have seen that in the land transport, building and industry sector also, there are several methods how you can reduce emission. So what we are trying to show is that, say, for example, if you are reducing your food losses, or say in many time in our countries, what happens is that from farm to table, there is a lot of food waste because of lack of cold storage, etc. And so we need to see how to reduce the food waste, and for each country it will be very different, and we need to adopt those measures. Then we know that what we are saying is that if you are looking only into the energy supply side decarbonization, burden of decarbonization for each country will be extremely high. Globally, this is the burden of decarbonization in the food sector for the supply side. But in the demand side, we can reduce this much just by looking into waste, etc., so that this much will be remaining in the supply side for decarbonization, because decarbonization in the supply side is more expensive than looking into the demand side and reducing those. So for each sector, we have identified where infrastructure need is more, like in the industry, you need to have a industrial park or something so that you have circularity of the material. You need to have in the land transport, different kind of infrastructure so that you can reduce the emission. In the building sector, you need more compact cities, the building codes, etc., so that you can reduce emissions. So we have identified what are the infrastructure need, what are the technology need, and what the behavioral changes, what kind of incentive, market incentive can bring in those changes. I'm just giving one example, which usually we do, is that in our chapter in IPCC report, in the 5th chapter of Working Group 3, what we tried to show is that suppose when we get nutrition, so if we look at from nutrition perspective, for providing the nutrition, finally, we need this much of water. But there is so much of water wastage in the whole process of upstream supply chain that water use leads to more energy and more resource use, and that leads to more unsustainable production process. So that we need to think of our entry point. We can enter from the nutrition perspective for well-being delivery, and then we see how we can deliver these services. So that's what we have done this time in the chapter 5 of IPCC Working Group 3. And we showed that if you work on the energy demand side, basically you have synergies with all the sustainable development goals. These blue ones are showing what are the positive impacts you can have on the different sustainable development goals compared to the supply side or land-based mitigation measures. So in the energy demand side, working across all sectors, we can generate more sustainable development benefit, which are important for our countries because we want to achieve the sustainable development goal and well-being for our people. So from that point of view, another issue which we brought out is that there is more electrification which is bound to happen because electricity is more efficient for providing any service. So electrification is the way forward for the whole world, but it is also important how you can reduce the demand for electricity without reducing your well-being. So the decarbonization burden of electricity reduces from this much to only this much by working through investment through all these sectors, so that we need to think how the demand side investment and how the supply side investment can be optimized for the developing countries so that we make our each investment future ready. And also what we did with all these numbers from the global reports, what we tried to do was that, okay, what does it mean for India, say, for example? So we tried to see that for India, if there is, say, 3 times or 5 times electricity demand increase, if we have different kind of the PV and the wind technologies, then can we meet India's demand for energy, even if it increases 5 times by 2050? Interestingly, we are developing a model for India, and which is an optimization model and which an open source model, and where we are showing that actually, if we look into the demand increase in 2050, even if it is 5 times, then we can see that we can actually build in this whole subcontinent, the resource endowment is coming in such a way when there is peak for solar, wind goes down, but when wind comes up, solar goes down. So there is a perfect complementarity between solar and wind in this whole subcontinent. And if we make use of that resource endowment flexibility, then we could see that we can produce per kilowatt hour of electricity with around, say, 3 to 4 cents, which is much below what is currently the electricity price right now. So this is important, and if we build that demand side flexibility into that. So this is extremely important to understand that it makes economic sense. How do we do it? We have been doing research on the Bangladesh also, and where we tried to show that actually for Bangladesh, very interestingly, when their history of development started, it was more gas-based, and because they had the domestic gas supply a lot. And whole of gas supply is in this yellow part of the country. Very interestingly, nothing of gas is available in this side, in the western part of Bangladesh. So all the development actually happened in this side because of the availability of the domestic gas supply. So there is an interesting challenge. How do you bridge these developmental challenge of these two because of the mighty river? Now with the bridge, there is a likelihood that you can take electricity from this side to this side. And also in this side, there is more of nuclear and also coal available, but we know that for coal, there is going to be if we invest now, there is going to be a stranded asset because we will have to close down prematurely those because of the emission targets, or we have to build very high cost carbon capture and storage, which technologies are not yet very well known or not even tried out in this region. So these are the challenges we need to be seeing how we can overcome regionally also. And we try to see basically that it is not true that Bangladesh has only gas. Actually, we digged out into details what can be done for Bangladesh, and we found that actually they can think in terms of next generation of biomass, solar and wind, hydrogen and geothermal. Extremely important to say that for Bangladesh, hydrogen geothermal has very high prospect because they have a very well-knit infrastructure for gas supply. And that itself can become an infrastructure for supply of hydrogen and geothermal. And we actually took the data of Bangladesh oil, depleted oils, and we tried to see that what is the potential for geothermal and how they can be used for hydrogen storing also. And it shows that there is high potential, and those are the things which needs to be looked into. We looked into also the different countries in the region in Asia, and we tried to see that during their fast growth phase, how they made use of their energy in terms of their economic progress. If you look into China, Singapore, and India, very interestingly, they could keep their energy use much less than their GDP growth rate, which means for 1 unit of GDP production, you needed less than 1 unit of energy, simply because more efficient technologies were used. But for South Korea, Malaysia, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, I have mentioned the years also. So actually, they use more energy, I mean, more than 1 unit of energy for producing 1 unit of GDP. It's a technological issue. And now the technologies are available all over the world. So it is a matter of adopting these. South Korea, I mean, it was during their growth phase, they did not do it efficiently, but now they have become efficient. But for Bangladesh and Pakistan, it means that there is enough opportunity to do that. And in the subcontinent, there is knowledge already available, so there can be cooperation for understanding and technology exchange also. For Bangladesh, what we tried to see that if this energy efficiency path is followed, then we see that their GDP growth will be much higher compared to all other scenarios where energy efficiency is not integrated. And also their investment, how much will be the investment and what will be the investment growth. So we found that integrating the demand side energy efficiency targets actually provides much faster economic growth and also the less emission and more investment. For India, I would just show that Indian industries have been taking lead in energy efficiency, and so India could decouple its activity, economic, industrial activity growth from energy use because of the energy efficiency improvement, which is this green line going below. And also, India has been able to reduce their, electricity intensity simply because of the efficient energy technology adoption. And for the Bureau of Energy Efficiency has done a lot towards that. So we actually showed that how different industries are spending money on energy efficiency to keep their energy cost low and market competitiveness better in the globally. And that's how they have reduced the India's energy efficiency. For Pakistan, we took the data and we also show that very interestingly, which the whole subcontinent can actually replicate. I mean, this shows number as small, but this has a very high implication that in the agriculture sector, the emission is declining. And very interestingly, why it is declining, if we look into, then we will see that the electrification in agriculture for over a few years in Pakistan has happened. And that has happened through solar, introduction of solar electricity in the agriculture sector. And that has reduced the agriculture emission in Pakistan compared to many other sectors. So what I want to say is that what I said so far is that what we can do for developmental purpose where more energy will be needed, but how we can meet both the global imperative for keeping emission low and India's commitment also, and also other countries' commitments also in terms of reduction of GHG emission. Every country has committed in their NDCs. But also what I want to highlight that in IPCC report, it shows that climate exposed sectors which get impacted due to the disaster or climate change extreme events are agriculture, forestry, fishery, energy, and tourism. And destructions of homes, infrastructure, and loss of property, income, food security, and gender equity and social equity are getting impacted. So what we need to think is that how do we build our resilience? So it's not only about emission reduction, but also resilience building. And we have to take these decisions in this decade. There are multiple choices, multiple entry points, but I see that if we take nutrition security as an entry point, then it gives us multiple options. And all our studies are based on different river basin level studies in India, Sutlej, Shipra, Kaveri, Alakananda, Sabarmati, and Mahanadi River Basin, Nepal, Bagmati River Basin, in Pakistan, Indus Valley River Basin, in Bangladesh, we did in Haor areas, and also in Sri Lanka and India, we have been doing on the home gardens, and we have been trying to see that how resilience building can be done. So what we learned is that if we take a nutrition point of view, then we will be trying to reduce the market uncertainty, and market uncertainty leads to income uncertainty, production uncertainty, and price volatility. To address these, we need to look at it as a system, how production system, distribution system, and delivery mechanism can be made resilient. So it's just not about the production system or farm level production increase, but distribution and delivery mechanism, unless we do that, then nutrition security will not be provided. So that is extremely important, which has multiple relation with human health and many other aspects. So what we saw is that if we take this same 5 capital approach, and then we look into, okay, the natural capital, so we need to look into the good air quality, we need to make investment in good air quality, water, forest, and the climate system. And also we need to see how we can create the more trained capacity to deliver this change, which is happening, but it has to happen at a much faster rate in our countries. We need, of course, trust toward the governance system so that right kind of policies are in place and right kind of incentives are there. But also what we need is baseline data. We need georeference data. We need critical infrastructure data. We need vulnerable population data. And we also need to build the early warning system, efficient buildings, railroads. So what I want to say that investing in these 5 capitals as a system should be our aim to make the economies resilient and to take the benefit of economic opportunities. We wrote a paper for Indian agriculture towards 2030, which was initiated by Niti Aayog and the FAO, and where we tried to show that actually we need to mainstream our adaptation plans. It is not additional. We need to mainstream our adaptation plan. I'm just giving an example from Indian subcontinent, India, where we saw that if we look into the Narega programs, then how we can leverage the watershed program for providing the adaptive capacity is very important. And then how can we make the agro advisory services for crop planning and contingency planning? How can we give more access to information so that everybody has information as a public service? And also insurance and credit and risk management for the farmers level. So we need to mainstream through these actions. And so I'm just showing that basically what we could see that India could actually reduce their methane emission over time from agriculture sector through their different agricultural practice change. And so, but of course, what is happening is that nitrous oxide is increasing. This is due to more fertilizer use, which can be done better, and how we have mentioned those. So there should be, fertilizer price policy can be managed better so that these can also be managed in India. We also tried to see that the different practices which are being taken, right? So how they are impacting the sustainable development goals. So we found that actually all these climate smart agriculture, sustainable intensification, as I said, nitrogen fertilizer use efficiency, and transition to less flooded paddy water management practices can give the food security and also generate all other benefits to different sustainable development goals. And also what I want to show is that, so what should be the priorities? The priorities should be that we know that climate variability has a risk for agriculture always. But what is the big opportunity? Big opportunity is that we need to provide new climate services, advisories, insurance, precision agronomy, and sound business models. And we need right partnership between science-based action, policies, market, non-market incentives, investment, and institutions. And we need to invest in natural capital, that means soil health. And then also, of course, the physical capital, say irrigation infrastructure. We need to knowledge, as I said, we need to give them the information. So all these we really need, as I said, as a systems approach. So not just one action can solve the problem. We need portfolio of action. And so this is something which I see that we need to follow in 6 assessment report, synthesis report in 2023 IPCC report. We could see that there is need for shifting the development pathway towards sustainability. So we should identify our development pathways and then try to see where it is failing to meet the sustainability goals, so that there can be additional top-up investment for making them sustainable. And those which are new ones, say for example, new city is going to be built, new agricultural practice to be taken, then we can adopt, we know which technology and what infrastructure and what practices needs to be taken. So this can happen only if the government and subnational governments are also involved with international cooperation, civil society and private sector. These are known, but then still this is extremely important to repeat every time so that we do not fail to make these attempts of collaborative action. And we have shown that mitigation and adaptation actions both have sustainable development goal achievement depending on which activities we are prioritizing. And what we need to understand is that the regions with less development has more vulnerability and climate hazard. So they need to be targeted, especially in these regions with priority, so that loss and damage are less. And then we need to understand that it has been identified that largest adverse impacts are going to be in the communities in Africa, Asia, Central and South America, less developed countries, small islands, and the Arctic, and indigenous people in small scale food producers and low-income households. So we need to prioritize. We know now that where to prioritize. So it's more about knowledge dissemination and then actions and policy and different kind of projects so that this can make our economies resilient. Now, everybody asks whether there is money or not. We just did another study and where we showed that actually during the pandemic, the whole world as stimulus package came up with $12.2 trillion US of fund globally. And we estimated for implementing the Paris compatible pathway, how much money is needed. And it was only 1.4 trillion per year is needed. So there needs to be regional demand for getting this money so that it can be Paris compatible development pathway. Globally, there is no dearth of money. So we need to understand what are the projects we need to do and for which we need money. For HIMAP report, where which we published in 2019, there also we showed that this whole region, this dark blue, is the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. And this is dependent on the whole glacial melt, and the whole future development of this mountainous region, Hindu Kush Himalaya region, depends on how sustainably we are managing this mountain system. And we came up with the conclusion that you can all go through the report that regional cooperation is extremely important for maintaining sustainability in the region. And regional data and information sharing and science and knowledge cooperation are must in this region. So with these words, I will stop here and I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's been a truly enriching session. We thank you immensely for sharing this knowledge with us. The floor is now open to questions from the audience. Once again, I'd like to remind that you can type in your questions in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and unmute yourselves and ask the questions.
So one of you will be moderating that, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, sure.
While we are getting questions, let me ask a question, Priyanka. Ma'am, we discussed so much about South Asia and the emerging need of ours. How do we go forward? Because we are having COP and we are also having net zero by 2050, 60, 70. How do you see the future of South Asia going, given our poverty levels and growth rate being very fast? How do you see, how do we go forward? What is your opinion about that? How we can have sustainable development? Yes.
You see, I mean, we are going to develop anyway, right? We have to make investment. We are every day taking some decision for making investment for growth. And it doesn't mean that we have to grow in a bad way. So what sustainable development simply says that you grow with a better investment, which makes you sustainable, right? So if we invest on an infrastructure, say, for example, if we convert a land from rain-fed agriculture to irrigated agriculture, then we need to be doing not flooded agriculture, but we can do drip irrigation, we can do the sprinkler irrigation. So for that, there has to be investment. And agriculture department can provide that. We can have the climate heat-resistant seed variety to be distributed to the farmers. So I don't think there is any conflict between development, sustainable development, and poverty eradication. Actually, if you do sustainable development, you reduce poverty faster. All studies show, even economics studies shows that all investments for sustainable development are growth enhancing as well as poverty reducing. So I do not see any conflict. It's a wrong notion which says that environment and growth do not go together. I mean, there are no examples. Now there are no examples. Even for India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, we have been doing for this whole region collaborative research all along. And just imagine what I said, right? So we said that in Sri Lanka, there is home garden. And also, they have so much of a home garden, which provides home security, food security to the households. Even in India, there are home gardens in the drought-prone areas, in Midnapur, in West Bengal. And then these are providing food security, ecosystems services, and also biodiversity. So it's a very wrong notion that development and sustainable development are not going together.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, we have some questions coming in. I'll read them out for you. Our question is from Professor Priyanka Puriji. She
Can also
asks
ask.
that, okay,
Rekha
okay, sir.
ji, if you can ask, Rekha ji, Komal ji, Madhur ji, if you can unmute and ask anyone. Madhur ji, Madhur Singh ji, Komal.
Yes, thank you. I'm
Madhur.
happy to ask my question first. Thank you.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
but
yeah.
I was thinking that we were taking the Priyanka Puri's question first, right? Because it was
Fine.
read.
Sure, sure.
So I'll just read it out. I can see it from here. So it says that, can you please throw some light on Sri Lanka in the light of the ongoing economic crisis and energy generation and consumption? I would say that I have not done any current research, but when I did for Sri Lanka, this current research needs to be understood in a much bigger picture. So these small crises and development is always talked about over 20 years, 30 years period, right? So how you develop a country. So Sri Lanka had a fantastic development path. So why this temporary crisis has come, that has enormous reasons, socio-political, geopolitical reasons, which I'm not an expert on, so I have to leave it to my Sri Lankan colleague who will be coming here. Sure. The next question.
Madhurji, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Roy. Thanks. That was very interesting. I'm wondering if you can tell us which sectors within Indian industry have been more successful at cutting emissions, cutting the intensity of their output, and which have been the laggards. And also, what are the policy or regulatory or other factors that have had the most influence in helping cut the emissions and intensity of GDP?
So if you ask me, actually, I can go back to the slide, but let me not, but I can tell you. If you look into the cement industry, it was wet process based in 1960s, 70s, 80s onwards, they started becoming dry process based. So the process change has made cement industry extremely efficient, and they have changed the clinker to cement ratio a lot, and that's why they have become more efficient. Iron steel industry, I would say as a sector, not each and every plant, but iron steel sector, then paper and pulp, glass industry, the major ones, the fertilizer industry, we say major 6 are the energy intensive industries. All the 6 industries have actually achieved a lot in terms of energy efficiency. The best of them is the cement industry, and then following it is steel industry, paper industry. But remember, in India, we have why did they become, right? So India had for a very long time energy policy. It may not be the climate policy. It's not always that climate policy drives action. It was the energy policy and Energy Conservation Act of India that was extremely helpful. And also the industries themselves, because we worked a lot on the Indian industries and even talking to the companies, and we found that they wanted to remain competitive in the market. So they started adopting innovation and they started changing their production processes, because Indian industries had a very big market and also they were competing internationally. So market competition and government's energy policy and conservation act helped them to become energy efficient for a long time. Now, even the building sector is becoming more and more because of the appliance standard, building codes. So there is so much to show. That's why I said that each country started differently and they tried to do differently, but then they all need to do all these so that they can achieve same growth, but with less emission. As the earlier question was that how can we grow and also meet the poverty reduction. If your economy grows, then your poverty reduction, if you are following the distributive justice, then poverty will reduce also. And if you are reducing energy in industrial production, you can use that energy maybe for providing electricity in the villages. So you have to see that how efficiently, how waste reduction can be made for making this possible. And I'm also seeing another question in the question answer box. So how do we, as all the calculations are done and channels are known, what is stopping us from executing? No, actually, it's not that it is stopping us, we are executing. The question is, what we are doing is that we are progressing at a rate which is much less than what we should be doing. So that is the, you see, when we teach in a class, we say that you are doing well, you are getting 60%. If you work a little harder, you get 70%. Exactly that message we are trying to say. So it's not that the countries are not doing, everybody is trying. Everybody has their nationally determined contribution, but that can be leveraged more. We published and we showed that how India can leverage it even more. And yes, somewhere microfinance works, and then somewhere self-help group in India, self-help group is also doing a lot in the villages in terms of, providing the women's resilience for building their investment in many small businesses. So what I want to say is that basically sometimes, we think that in our regions, we are not doing much, but my mission is to do the research and show that this region is doing a lot. And we have also shown that actually India can overachieve its 2030 goals. So basically we are overachieving. So we should be proud of what we are doing, and so that we can take it forward further. So doing research on our own countries is first thing, which I see that is most important.
Thank you, ma'am. We see another question popped up. It's from Karishma Talreja ji. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, no, I can see it. What are the areas and scope for cooperation among South Asian countries for addressing the common issue of climate change? And what is the knowledge that can be shared between the countries? Oh, thank you for asking the question. I'll just give you, because we all did all these, right? So I just get encouraged when you ask me this question. I'll just give one example. When we were doing the 2017 flood impact assessment for a study in Bangladesh, in Sunamganj area, we saw that the farmers lost their crop because they are cultivating 190 days crop cycle paddy. In India, we have only 90 days variety of seed. Why can't both the countries cooperate and understand how to do the short cycle variety with same food security, and it reduces your risk to the climate events? This is one. The second thing, as I showed, that Bangladesh and Pakistan are lagging behind in terms of their energy efficiency in industry sector and many other sectors. India started it much earlier. So there is a huge cooperation and knowledge transfer, technology understanding that can happen. The electricity transmission or power trade between the countries actually can make it almost near zero, even if we internally cannot make ourselves net zero pretty soon, because there is in the whole region, Nepal has 100% renewable, Bhutan has 100% renewable. So if we look into all the resources that we have in the region, and if we have a power grid running through the region, for which we do need geopolitical stability, then it will be extremely important that we achieve the sustainable development goal together and well-being for people in the region together. There are ample of examples. I would request you all to go through the HIMAC report, and these are all downloadable freely. You know, we should not be spending time on our Facebook. We should read all these reports each day so that we know there is so much we can do in the region. I'm sorry, I'm just advocating for these, but then that's what I feel. There is so much of knowledge now.
Thank you, ma'am. Meanwhile, we have another question that's come up from Manoj Pastamji, who's asking, how can we achieve climate resilience in informal settlements inside urban areas? What do local and central government plan to go forward?
No, what the governments are planning, it's a government's decision, right? So I can't say that. But what I can say is that there are why they are not resilient. If you look into that, then one of the things that we have studied and we have found is that basically their housing structure are such that during the extreme heat and extreme cold, this really impacts them. Extreme rainfall impacts them. So why cannot we make these more resilient housing? And that one decision can solve many, right? And this will mean a lot of investment, and a lot of investment means income generation within the economy, right? So we are talking about economic growth, and we are talking about making people better off. So how to integrate these? There are ample of information, scientific information available. So what we need is, if you ask me, then I would say that science policy interface is more important to solve these problems.
Thank you, ma'am. Komalji has another question. Komalji, if you would like to unmute and ask.
Why climate finance is not sufficiently available in India, despite global action? You know, all studies are showing for everything, we do not need climate finance. Climate finance has a very targeted, because we have to show some additionality. And if you, I do not know if you followed the literature during the CDM projects, India was the foremost country to get the climate finance. So in terms of vulnerability, India ranks much lower compared to many other small island countries. So if you understand where the finance will flow, it's completely different. But for India, just the development finance can make country more resilient, and we may not need conditional loans from the international funding agency. So we need to be more self-reliant, and we need to see how our developmental finance can make development more resilient.
Thank you, ma'am. There's one more question in the chat box from Professor Priyanka Puriji. She's asking, since you have mentioned a geographical divide in energy production in Bangladesh, is it impacting the development patterns as well in the country? Is it having any relation to the economic boom experienced by the country post-COVID?
Interestingly, so I would say that if you look into the two sides, so the yellow part was actually more developed compared to the white part, which I showed in the left-hand side of the reverse, right? So historically, that was the reason, because there was no big connectivity in the two regions. So now with the Padda Bridge, they are trying to set up these a mobility between the two sides, and the developmental divide will be reducing a lot. And now the nuclear plant is actually in the left-hand side, and the coal plants are all in the left-hand side, which are giving them power in these regions. So that has changed the developmental pattern completely. And one more thing which we need to understand is that, as I said, every country tried to develop in their own way, and that's the beauty of diversity. In Bangladesh, they achieved social development faster compared to the economic development. In all our countries, we did economic development first and then the social development. But their policies were geared towards more social improvements. And so that has built a different kind of social capital for them. And so I have written a lot on Bangladesh over past 5 years as Bangabandhu chair. And so I have seen that it's extremely interesting development model, and which is very different. And another important contribution which came in Bangladesh is because they had the domestic gas supply. And what they did, they used the domestic gas supply for productive purposes first, rather than consumptive purposes. They gave the gas connection initially to the industries first, rather than giving to the households. This was extremely important role to play for fertilizer industry and cold storage industry. And that's how their agriculture development and fisheries development was extremely advanced because of that.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, in the interest of time, we'll take a couple of questions, and we have a couple of questions together. So we have a question from Mr. Amit Agarwal ji. And he's saying that there's always a trade-off between short-term gains versus long-term sustainability for most corporates. It seems that companies conduct their materiality assessment and find that sustainability or ESG risks aren't material to their operations. When it comes to Indian companies, what can they do to actually balance these goals? And another question, ma'am, we have from Vishali Singh ji. She's asking how we rely on GDP to measure our economic growth and find the gap areas. Similarly, do you think developing an environmental measure will help to address the shortfall in our environmental efforts or targets while working towards the development and at the same time keeping a check on the accountability?
Two very short answers. For the first one, actually those industries which are competing in the market and trying to build their image with the stakeholders who go public, they all prioritize ESG now. And those who are not prioritizing, they are actually lagging behind. So it is the interest of the company to stay longer in the market. Companies stay there, or the businesses stay there for 80 to 100 years, right? So it's just not for 5 years or 4 years they are in business. It's not like the political parties. So industries have to have a long-term vision and then take. So those industries which are, progressive, they are taking long-term vision. So it's the interest of the industries which they should be doing. But there should be also policy which makes them to incentivize to do that. The second question is that actually now when I showed the 5 capital, then we are moving away from the GDP defined growth paradigm to sustainable development defined growth paradigm. So in that, it just not the GDP growth you are looking at. You are looking into the 17 sustainable development goals or the 5 capitals. So the whole paradigm of measuring humanity's progress has changed, and it is happening. And every country is implementing it. So I'm very positive about it. I feel that if we do more research, if we do look into more science, we'll be very hopeful that there is hope for the whole world to progress sustainably.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This is a very informative session. Thank you for taking up our Q&A as well. We look forward to having you at the IMPRI Web Policy Talk in the future.
Thank
I
you.
guess we can move along now since we do not have any more questions. So moving along to our second session of the day on climate change and its implication for the economy in Pakistan by Dr. Jabir Syed ji, Associate Professor of Environmental Studies, Comsats University, Islamabad, Pakistan. Thank you for tuning with us today, sir. Over to you.
It
Dr.
seems we
Syed
cannot
ji,
hear.
can you hear us, Syed ji? Can you hear us, Jabir ji? Can you hear us, Jabir ji? Yeah, but we are not able to hear you. You can, bottom left, you can see the, please unmute yourself. Meanwhile, we can request Professor Rekha Nianthi ji to start her session. Rekha ma'am, are you able to hear us? Professor Rekha Nianthi ji.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we
I
can hear
can.
you.
Yeah, I can.
Ma'am, we can hear you, but not your video.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
trying. Yes.
Okay, okay.
So, it's controlling from your side video.
Sorry, ma'am.
The video is controlling from your side. So it's correct. It's given the option.
No, but we cannot see you. We can hear you. Nevertheless, ma'am, do you have your slides ready? Then we can start. Rekha ji, do you have your slides ready?
In the meanwhile, I would like to convey our apologies for the inconvenience to all our participants today. We're having some technical issues on our experts end. As soon as these are resolved, we'll be back with the sessions in no time.
Jabir ji, can you hear us? And Dr. Syed ji, can you hear us?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me, please?
Oh, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, let me share the screen.
Okay, please
I
go
hope
ahead.
it is visible to all.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay, thank you very much once again, IMPRI. Thank you once again for the organizers. And Assalamu alaikum and Namaste from Pakistan. I'm very happy to join this intellectual session. And I'm very happy to be the part of this summer school program, which is really going well. And I must say that it's a good opportunity for the youngsters, for the academicians, for the researchers, and for other people to join our expert team and to learn and to share the views on the climate change, and it's related to some other topics. So I'm a little bit, I want to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Jabir Syed. I'm working as a associate professor at Department of Meteorology. My background is environmental sciences. I mainly work for the uh, impacts of environmental pollution and climate change. And I'm also trying, my research group is trying to develop some connection of the climate change, its implications, and for the economy in Pakistan. So before going to start this session, I would like to introduce a little bit about the climate change situation in Pakistan. So let me start with this. So what is the main socioeconomic development and the adaptive capacity of the population? If we talk about the South Asia, we are the most among top 5 most vulnerable nations in the world. And we have seen and we have experienced few of the most extreme weather events in the last 2 decades, I must say. And the most recent floods happened in 2022 in Pakistan. So if we look at the statistics in Pakistan, so a bit harsh conditions happen in the southern part of the countries, happen loss of many lives and some of the economic losses, especially the agricultural zone in the southern part of the country has faced a lot of extreme events. That's why, because Pakistan is mainly an agricultural based country, so we have suffered a lot of economic losses of worth 3.8 billion US dollar in last 2 decades. And if we look at the statistics provided by the IPCC special report on the climate change and land, the recent increase in the temperature as compared to the previous century is also worth noting. So if we look at the statistics, we are already ahead of the other part of the world, especially the other subcontinent countries like India, Bangladesh, and other part of the South Asia. And mainly if you look at the subcontinent, we are facing some of the rapid increase of the annual temperature in Pakistan for the last 2 or 3 decades. So being an environmentalist, what I will try to look at and how I will try to connect the climate change impacts with the economy in Pakistan, mainly I will look at its impacts on the agriculture sector. So if we look at the agriculture sector, definitely 60 to 70%, and recent census show us that 62% of the population in Pakistan, they are living in the rural areas. They belongs to the and background areas in Pakistan, and they are mainly reliable, and their economy is mainly reliable on the agriculture sector. If we talk about the cash crops, and if we talk about some of the fruits and vegetables in the northern part of the country. So I will try to discuss the major factors which are affecting the agriculture, and mainly I will try to develop a link between climate change and its impact on the economy of Pakistan by discussing different factors, main factors, starting from the extreme events changing in the weather patterns, and then Gulf events, mainly in the Hindu Kush, Karakoram, and the Himalaya region in the northern part of the country, and some of the heat wave events in the southern part, especially in Karachi and the coastal areas in the Sindh province. And definitely the most important one is the air pollution, which I think we are facing some of the transboundary air pollution issues in this subcontinent regions. And when we talk about these events, we have some major events occurring at the results of these events, especially in the form of floods, especially in the form of droughts, and then the sea level rise in the coastal city of Pakistan. So starting with the changing patterns, so let me have a look on the statistics for the last 60 years. The data is provided by the Pakistan Meteorological Department. So definitely any extreme weather, it has definitely a lot of impacts on the economy, on the agriculture in Pakistan. So here is some of the calculations, recent calculations, and you can see the weather extremes, especially the amount of precipitation in terms of millimeter is increasing since 2001. And when we look at the pattern, overall pattern, when we try to look at and we try to connect it with international scenario, on the one side, the temperature in Pakistan increasing, and on the other side, the precipitation is also increasing. And these precipitation events mainly they are not like they can be categorized as the unprecedented events in Pakistan, and most of the events, they are unpredicted, just like happened in last year, and which definitely caused some of the highest floods in the recent years in the country. So here is the statistics of the direct losses and affected areas and the flooded areas for last around 70 years. And when we look on the right side of this slide, we can see the map showing the estimated number of different losses, and which areas are highly affected by the floods happened in 2022. So when I talk about the southern part of the country, you can see in the lower parts, like in the Sindh province, it has received more than 600 millimeter rainfall in 2022. It was it was happened in the summer 2022, and it's very surprising when we link this precipitation with the previous years. It's very surprising that the previous years, like before 2022, the average rainfall in these areas were recorded around 120, 130 millimeter. So what happened and what has happened in the result of those floods, more than 30 million people are affected. So a huge number of population, one third population of the country were affected by these floods. And definitely these floods have a strong impact on the agriculture in the country. And you can see the number on the top of the slide, that the losses amount which can be calculated in terms of its impacts on the economy. So it's happened like it has affected 2.2% of the total GDP. And the major target was the agriculture sectors, and there was a largest decline happened at the rate of 0.9% in the agriculture sector. So it's very clear that definitely we are not the countries. Pakistan is not the country who are contributing towards the carbon emissions. I mean, we are contributing less than 1% of the carbon emissions if we talk about the statistics. But when we look at the vulnerability index, we are among top 10 or top 5 countries in the world. And definitely it is happening because of these extreme events. And if we look at the heat waves, yes, on the other side, the heat waves, definitely they are also affecting the agriculture production in the country. And when we talk about the heat wave, it usually causes water scarcity, and it can generate wildfires, and definitely these events can be connected with economic losses. So on the right side, we have some statistics, we have some graph which can compare the Pakistan with the other countries in, in, in South Asia. So if we look at the heat wave episode in 2019 and 2020, so it has definitely affected a lot in the country. And recently, during this year, we have experienced some of a very different kind of summer in Pakistan. Like usually the temperature has started increasing in May, June, July, and up till August. But what happened in Pakistan this year, that we have enjoyed a very, I can say that a very cold summer month if we talk about the last 50 or 60 years. But soon after June, we are receiving some unprecedented events of the rainfall in the country, and then also experiencing some of the heat waves in the country as well. So all these extreme climate related events, it definitely degrade the environment, and it ultimately affect the GDP of the country. And I will talk about talk about air pollution, which has definitely a significant on the economy in the country, and definitely it's a major driver which can enhance the changing climate scenario in the country, and definitely in the subcontinent. So here are some of the statistics related to the gloves. And where gloves happen, actually it happens usually in the northern part of the country. We have a very unique kind of ecosystem in the northern part of the country. We have three high mountainous systems in Pakistan. Namely, we are very familiar with the Hindu Kush, Himalaya, and Karakoram. But what's happening over there, when we look about the glacier melting and the floods related to the glacier melting events in the country, so we have a very famous terminology used, especially if I talk about the scientific terminology, is related to the Karakoram anomalies. So on one side, where the glaciers are adding up in the Himalaya region, in the Himalaya mountainous region, on the other side, few of the glacier in the other part of that regions, they are melting very quickly, which adding up to the some of the extreme events like floods happened in 2010. It was happened mainly because of the glacier melting in the northern part of the country. And then if you look about the 2022 flood, there is a huge difference between 2010 and 2022 flood. 2022 floods were mainly happened because of the high intensive rainfall in the southern part of the country. But when we look about the 2010 flood, it was happened because of the Gulf events, and then we have some events related to the some of the encroachment areas in the northern part of the country, which has definitely damaged a lot to the local property, to the local infrastructure, to the agricultural land. And the result of all these factors, it happened some of the extensive loss of life in part of country. So when we look at the previous studies, when we look at the published paper, and so we can see that there are many research projects going on glass. So we can say that few of the studies, recent studies, which we are conducting in the northern part of the country in recent years, and definitely these Gulf events are very important to study, which mainly enhancing the degradation of ecosystem and pristine ecosystem in the northern part of the country. So here are some of the statistics, or you can see the areas which are uh, classified as the mainly hazard areas with respect to the drought. And again, you can see that the southern part of the country, including some part of the Balochistan, some part of the Punjab province, and some part of the Sindh province near Karachi, this one in the Balochistan province, and this part uh, in the Punjab province, they are highly affected by the drought events. And when we look at the droughts, and when we look at the water scarcity condition in those areas, on one side, we have categorized those areas as the extreme high hazard areas related to the drought. But on the other side, when unpredicted extreme events like the rainfall happened in these areas in 2022, so it's very difficult to develop some action plan to address these climate changes happening in the country. So it's a huge challenge to look at those conditions in the country, that how we can develop some climate resilient infrastructure in those areas where the weather conditions are really unpredictable. And then on the other side, the urban areas in Pakistan is highly affected by the air pollution recently. And I second our respected speaker from AIT, who told that Pakistan is trying to move towards the renewable energy resources, and we are trying to reduce the use of the agricultural byproducts and agricultural residues for the production of energy. We are trying to reduce the emissions from the agriculture sector, and we are trying to use the alternate energy sources like solar panel, that we have a lot of potential for the solar energy in the country. But what happened recently in the urban areas in Pakistan, that it really affected the air pollution, air quality health in the central part of the country. Like if we talk about Punjab, Punjab is facing smoke event every year. Like we have already defined four seasons in the country, but it has been well noticed during the last 5 or 6 years that smoke is categorized as the fifth season, and it's very well classified between October to December. So why it is happening in the country? The major factor is that those months are the driest month, mainly in the central part of the country. We receive less amount of rainfall. Secondly, it's reducing in the temperature and increasing the humidity in the atmosphere and in the air. And then definitely the low quality fuels from the vehicular emissions, and then from the industrial emissions. And at the end, I must say that the crop residual burning in the central part of the Punjab province, near to Lahore and some other areas from where I belong, like in those areas, usually what we are trying to implement some of the activities, still there are some implication in implementation for the control of air pollution. So definitely these air pollution events, and when we look at the ranking of the most air pollutant cities in the world, you can see that South Asian cities, including some cities from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, some cities from India, we are among the top most polluted cities we are having, unfortunately. Like if it is happening in Lahore, definitely it is happening in Delhi. And there was some interesting question in last session, that what kind of transboundary or what kind of collective cooperation can be done to reduce the climate change scenario in the subcontinent. So I would like to answer that question in that way, that the transboundary movement of some of the specific air pollutants like PM2.5 from one country to another country, it can be reduced through the regional cooperation. We are trying to develop some of the guidelines through SARC platform, that we can develop uh, uh, a setup, or we can develop a committee, or we can develop a regional cooperation program which can provide a platform for the policymakers and for the researchers to regionally cooperate with each other and to reduce the impacts of climate change in the country. And definitely, I must say, if we will talk about the air pollution on the top, it's very helpful. And on the other side, if we look at the water quality pollution, um, we have a lot of studies on water pollution studies, transboundary pollution from Afghanistan to Pakistan, from Pakistan to other part of the countries. And then if we look at some of the rivers, regional rivers, so we can definitely cooperate in that sense. And although the impact of rising sea level in the country, because we have only one coastal city in Pakistan, which is Karachi, definitely the seawater intrusion, it's affecting some coastal areas in Pakistan, and especially it is affected the highly populated region in the Karachi, in the southern part of the country, in terms of degrading the water quality, definitely degrading some of the soils in those coastal areas. So it's also one of the important factor which should be studied to check the impact of because definitely coastal cities are always very important when we talk about the economy, we want to talk about the GDP. Definitely the problem associated with rising rate of the sea levels are very important to study. And in Pakistan, if we look at the Karachi, we are facing water quality issues over there. We are facing sea water intrusion problem in the urban areas, and because of this, I think so that we are also facing some of the unpredicted extreme weather events in those areas as well. And because of all these factors, uh, as I mentioned in the start of my presentation, that when I talk about the impacts of climate change on the economy of Pakistan, so I will mainly discuss the two sectors. The one is agriculture sector, and the other is water sector, because our agriculture sector is mainly associated with the provision of precipitation we received in the southern part of the country. And it is mainly associated with the Indus river system. And Indus Delta, it's very important in terms of the agriculture. And when we look at the statistics for last 5 or 6 years, uh, we have seen some of the uh, shifting in the agriculture, major crops production in different parts of the country. So, for example, we have observed a significant decline in the cotton production in the southern part of the country. In the meanwhile, we have seen that the arid and some of the hyper arid zones uh, in few parts of Punjab and Sindh province, they are like in during last few years, uh, definitely they are highly affected. Like as I mentioned, the floods of 2022, those floods has really affected the cotton production in those areas, and it has also affected the mango production. And then we talk about those areas, and when we talk about the land degradation in those areas because of the floods, it also affected the major cash crop wheat in the country as well. So there is some of the shifting in the agriculture, that the people, they are going to grow some of the like uh, unconventional crops in the country, like they are majorly relying on some of the fruits and vegetable production recently. They are mainly relying on the maize production. We have some new varieties in the country which seriously affect the cotton production, the sugarcane production, and definitely because of these disaster, climate-induced disaster, it happened that the wheat production was also reduced due to these climate-induced events. So, what is the solution of all these things? So recently in 2023, Pakistan has approved its national adaptation plan. We were also uh, uh, we were also among the leading countries in COP 27 in Egypt to talk about the loss and damage fund, which is happening and which has approved by the IPCC. But definitely that when we talk about the climate finance, that how much we have the potential that we can receive those funds from the Global Climate Fund. I think so that we need to go towards a climate resilient country. We need to provide some of the climate adaptation measures, and some of the like as our respected madam, she has also uh, uh, emphasized on the climate resilient infrastructure, and especially the climate smart agriculture, which can reduce definitely the amount and the usage of water in the agriculture sector. We need to look at different crop varieties, which can definitely uh, we can say that those varieties, those crop varieties are highly resilient to the climate disasters. And we need to look at the mitigation as well. Although we are not contributing, although we are among the less emitters, but still there are some of the events, like we can reduce significantly the air pollution events in the country, which is definitely affecting the climate change scenario in the country. And also it is contributing to the southern, and uh, it is also affecting the neighboring countries and the countries in the South Asian part as well. So we need to look at the sustainability part as well. We need to look at the renewable energy sources. Like we are trying to switch, we need to improve our energy mechanisms as well. We need to reduce the emissions. uh, we need to take some of the actions to uh, to provide some of the mitigation strategies to increase the forest areas in the country. So here are, we have some of the um, uh, national adaptation plan. So what we have some goals, definitely we have some broader goal and we have some specific goal. And after the 18th amendment, the environmental subject is provincial now in Pakistan. But when we look at the um, uh, federal part, the federal ministry, definitely they are trying to develop of some of the adaptive measures. Like they have provided three sectors some of the subsidies, like in agriculture they are trying to encourage the climate smart agriculture interventions. Like they are trying to discourage the flood irrigation. Definitely we are facing some of the, as we are not water scarce country, but we are water stressed country. So we need to manage our resources. And then on the other side, we are also trying to develop some of the integrated water resource management policies on provincial and as well as on the federal level as well. And then the main focus of those ministries to develop some climate finance unit to seek some of the climate finances from GCF, from some other international project. Like recently we have being a country level project is also some of the South Asian countries like Bangladesh and Nepal are also part of that. And its name is CARE, Climate Adaptation and Resilience. So we are trying to encourage, we are working with the FAO as well to develop some of the adaptation plan in the southern part of the country. And then with the CARE project, Pakistan, they are also trying to develop some of the networks with the international partners, trying to develop some adaptation and resilient Pakistan, which definitely help to reduce the impacts of climate change on agriculture, on water resources, and ultimately it will affect the economy of the country. So as we are talking on the regional level, so how we can help each other, how you can help, how we can play some role on the regional level and then on the global level. Like with the world becoming a global village, everyone they are talking about climate change. Everyone they are asking about the rapid warming of this planet. we, the researchers, the policymakers, academicians, everyone, they are trying to play their role. They are trying to publish some of the reliable data sets on these facts. But what we need to do is to do the action, climate action. We look at the action because on one side, we are trying to generate, on one side, we are trying to collect some of the most reliable data sets that how climate change is affecting this globe, is affecting our region. But on the other side, we need to focus on the mitigation as well as do we need to develop some of the climate resilient infrastructure for our water resources, for our rivers, for the dams and the other associated infrastructure with the water sources. Then on the other side, we need to focus, we need to advocate, we need to reduce the pollution, either it is air pollution, water pollution, and some of the pollution from the open burning in developing countries like Pakistan and other developing countries in South Asia. And we need to shift to the renewable resources. We need to enhance and we need to protect our forest areas, which definitely help to squeeze the amount of carbon. And Pakistan has recently won a huge project. Its name is Recharge Pakistan, and WWF Pakistan, they are leading this project. And this project is mainly related to the capacity building of the local communities and the development of the local infrastructure, which definitely should be the climate resilient infrastructure. And I think it's a huge project, and we are looking forward at how we can contribute at the country level if we talk about climate change impacts and climate-induced disaster in the country. So with these words, I will stop here, and I once again thank you all the organizers for the invitation. And if you have any question, I would be happy to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This is a very enlightening presentation. Your knowledge sharing has been invaluable to this session and all the participants. As sir mentioned, the floor is now open to questions from the audience. And once again, I'd like to say that you can type your questions in the Q&A box, mention it in the chat box, or you can raise your hands and we'll take your questions one by one. I see some questions coming up. Yamini Khandelwal ji, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? Yamini ji, are you there? Or I can ask on her behalf, I guess. So yeah, she's asking, what are some of the national level programs and actions to combat climate change?
This is the first question I can see.
Yes, yes.
I can see that for one question from Yamini. Thank you very much. So as I mentioned that at national level, if we look at Pakistani government and its recent projects,
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are. We've lost sir, I guess, due to some, must be some network issue. We'll wait for Sir to rejoin. It's taking Sir some time to reconnect. So I suggest all the participants who have questions regarding Sir's session in particular, you can type your questions and we will relay them to Sir. We can take them meanwhile while he's trying to join, and we can take them later at the end of Rekha ma'am's session. And we would like to continue with Professor Rekha Nianthi ji now. So our third session is on the topic of climate change assessment and economic impacts by Professor Rekha Nianthi ji, a professor, Department of Geography, University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. Thank you for joining with us today, ma'am. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Priyanka. So I will share my screen. It is visible?
Not yet, ma'am.
Not yet, is coming.
It has started.
Yeah.
Now, yes.
Yeah. So I will put the.
Ma'am, full screen, you can go.
Yeah, I'm trying something wrong today. Yeah, it's okay now.
Perfect, ma'am. Perfect.
Yeah, I continue. So then actually I will not focus in Sri Lanka perspective, but I will give my speech related to Indian subcontinent, Asian countries, especially regarding the climate change and economic impacts. I think most of the speakers in this session and the last week, maybe they were explaining about from the very beginning what is climate change and everything. From my presentation also, I just start a very basic concept with the climate change definition. I think everybody knows about this definition. United Nations introduced refer to long-term shift in temperature and weather patterns. We basically we focus always temperature and rainfall, but it's also important other weather parameters also, mainly due to the burning of fossil fuels. We know what is the fossil fuels: coal, oil, and gas. Actually, which produce the heat trapping gases, or other way we say greenhouse gases. So NASA also giving the definitions. Climate change describe a change in the average condition, such as temperature and rainfall in a region, maybe, and also over a long period of time. So we know that in this century, we are talking about the human causes of climate change and global warming, but also we should know about the natural causes of global warming and climate change. As we know, human causes, emissions of greenhouse gases, burning of fossil fuels, deforestation and agricultural activities, livestock, and transportation increasing now, and pollution, all those things comes under human causes of climate change. But as well as natural causes also very important, but these things are very long-term impacts, given to the long-term impacts. So then kind of continental drift and natural forest fires, even volcanic eruptions and ocean currents. If the ocean currents changing, it will give much more impacts to the oceans and also the continents. So falling of the meteoroids and variation of the solar variation, sunspot and solar cycles. But these things also happening in very slow mode, slow motion. But actually, we are now talking about the human causes regarding the global warming and climate change. I have seen many scholars have shown this type of graphic, because we are based on the IPCC and other standard reports. We have taken all the kind of results and discussion taken from the standard IPCC guidelines documents. So then here you can see world has been getting warmer and warmer. So from the average level, so you can see from 1850, below average, the blue color is below average, but we can notice now it is in here from 1950 or before that, it is increasing trends, positive increasing trends. So temperature is continuously increasing. So it is as a result of the increase of CO2, carbon dioxide, or other greenhouse gases like methane. So we know now the world is now warmer in 1.1 Celsius degree than last 19th century. So you can see the level of 1950 carbon dioxide increases parts per million. So now the current level is here. I think these days, maybe you heard about this daily global mean surface temperature recorded were the July 3rd to 6th, 2023 were the warmest day on record, crossing 17 Celsius degree in the world. Now you can see these three lines, 1979 to 2000 mean of the temperature, and from January to December. So then the second line is this, and now it's passing the now 2023 year. So now recorded as July 3rd to 6th as warmest day. Actually for this, what are the causes for this? As we understand, human emissions of greenhouse gases, and also plus ongoing El Nino events in the tropical Pacific Ocean. So now therefore global average temperature, it's increased or climbed to 17.23 Celsius on July 2023. It is an increases from the previous record holders of 17.18 Celsius. So it is very clear that, I mean, every decade, year to year, temperature increases. This is the good example for that. So coming to the Indian subcontinent's climate change. When we talk about climate change, it is actually Indian subcontinents are very complex, having very complex interactions between an atmosphere, ocean, and the land. So therefore, actually, it is very important to understand how this climate is changing across this region, Asian region, and what are the economic impacts and how these changes we expected to grow in future also. So you can see here my country, Sri Lanka, is a small country, but all other, we as Asians, so we all need to think about these changes, climate change as a region. We need to take some action together. Thinking of Indian subcontinent's climate influences. Even Sri Lanka and your country and other Asian countries, these three are very prominent three controlling factors. You know, ITCZ seasonal changes of intertropical convergence zone, ITCZ, and large-scale seasonal wind system and Indian monsoon. So here you can see intertropical convergence zone is seasonally change in moving. Now here, this time, intertropical convergence zone situated in here above Sri Lanka, because monsoon winds coming from the Indian Ocean, and it's going to the low pressure belt. Here we call as intertropical convergence zone, and it's come when it reached to month of October, November, December. So it will come down again for then monsoon start from the Bay of Bengal. So in Sri Lanka, we have 4 climatic season. Basically, these 2 are the main season. We call Southeast monsoon and the Northeast monsoon. So you can see we have basically 3 climatic zone, but we have now more than 100 agroclimatic zones also. Here 3 zones is here wet zone, and this is inter zone, and this is dry zone. So the dry zone rainfall get from the northeast monsoon. I mean, it's December to February, and here wet zone get rainfall from the southwest monsoon. It is very similar to India. Here you can see our southwest monsoon start from May to it goes up to September. And India also it start maybe around June. It's southwest monsoon. Maybe you call some other name, but we call as southwest monsoon. And here coming to the global picture of under climate change, previous speaker also, Dr. Jabir and many others also talk about these heat waves. Here is the latest 2023 sources. So you can see the heat waves are spreading everywhere, not only Asian countries, whole world, and especially Europe countries even. You can see the India, more than 150 people died in June. Maybe now the figure is changed. It's more than that. If you know, you can say for us now the how many people died. And you can see the China situation about the China and Iran and even Europe countries here. And Pakistan also 22 people died June 25th. So it's spreading like anything. The Spain, these countries actually mid-latitude countries, UK, Spain, France, European countries. But it's we can notice heat waves are increasing like anything. Coming to Indian subcontinent, Asia, some points I pointed out here. Surface air temperature has been increasing all over Asian countries. It is very high confidence. IPCC say it's high confidence level. It threats definitely to social and economic sustainability. And also heat waves, as I shown you, threats of heat waves across Asia. Not only Asia, European 2022, European heat waves also very abnormal and increased the death records. And droughts increase in arid and semi-arid areas, West, Central, and South Asia, because the South Asia, it is affect to all of us, Central and West Asia drought increase, arid and semi-arid areas. And also delaying monsoon circulation pattern on in South Asia is another problem, because our countries, basically Sri Lanka, depend on the agricultural production, agricultural activities. So if the monsoon is delayed, definitely it's affecting to our agriculture production. It's happening actually. Some years actually, when we expect the southeast monsoon, we don't get on time. Even the northeast monsoon also, farmers are expecting to cultivate paddy, but now it is almost 1 month delay. The rainfall pattern is changing. So, and flood in monsoon regions in South, Southeast and East Asia, it's continuing. the flood impacts. And glaciers melting, Hindu Kush, I think you know about that, Hindu Kush Himalaya region, glaciers melting, and extreme weather events have caused trillions of dollars of economic damage in recent decades. So then the cost of early action on climate change in South Asia is lower than the cost of damage brought about by climate change impact. So better actually always precautions, before happen. So taking action is very, very important actually when we talk about the climate change. But the WMO is saying that because of the early warning system is improvement of the early warning system, death toll has actually fallen when compared to the earlier previous years. But economic damage, loss and damage are increasing. So, and also Asian countries are experiencing hotter summer and increase in energy demand for cooling, because when it's hotter summer, so that we identified that energy demands also increasing. So then energy consumption in Asia exposed to high energy insecurity in future. So the position of North Asian mountains move upwards after 1990s, while in Himalaya tree line demonstrate multi-directional shift. So this IPCC is saying that it having the demonstrate the multi-directional shift, but definitely North Asian mountains moving upwards. And terrestrial and freshwater species are changed with climate change across whole Asia. It's having high confidence and medium confidence. And also North Asia increase in wildfire and burning wildfire, that is because of the lightning occurring increasing and climate change. But basically another main factor is the human activities, human interference. Coming to the Asian cities are more vulnerable to natural disasters. So you can see this picture is a Manila, Philippines. This is not only Manila, so we all are suffering from this type of floods everywhere now. Not only Asian countries, if you remember 2021 German floods, actually when we see that video, I was so surprising. It's these countries are very rich countries, but even then they have this type of issues. So we have to think about what are the differences of these countries and where the gaps and shortcomings are there. So then 1/3 of Asian cities, 932 million urban dwellers live in areas with high risk of flooding. So then highly vulnerable to flood-related economic losses, because as I said earlier, death records are falling according to WM and other organizations, but the cost of damage, loss and damage and economic losses are increasing. And also length of plant growth season has increasing in some part of East and North Asia. It's having the high confidence, and habitat losses of animal plants and also linked with the climate change in some part of Asia. And climate change can change species interaction and spatial distribution pattern of invasive species in Asia. It's a high confidence, and changes in ecosystem in Asia is also expected to be driven by projected climate change. And the other one is a very remarkable thing is climate change will intensify the urban heat islands effects across Asian cities. I think some of the points are very, very important for us to carry out the future research also, because I know here this audience, maybe some are postgraduate students, maybe undergraduate students, they are finding the topics for their research reports and their master's degree thesis and MPhil thesis. So, so there are several kind of gaps and shortcomings and research questions and research problems when we discuss these things can take from these discussions. So here, urban heat island affects across Asian cities, especially South and East Asia. So South mean our countries also affecting. So it's at 1.5 Celsius to 2 Celsius temperature rise. So it will also increase. This is one of the study in Sri Lanka. So we can see decadal wise how Colombo and Gampaha area district change in LST land surface temperature. So it is very clear that all our countries are having the similar pattern of climate change. And Asian scenarios rise in temperature are expected to contribute to upward shift of mountains tree lines. So actually these research are very rare, this type of research. In future, I think these all affecting for our ecosystem and other kind of natural resources near future. So rise in temperature, ocean acidification and sea level rise has brought negative effects to livelihoods of the coastal community of Sri Lanka, because India, our countries, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, we have a huge amount of people living in the coastal areas, coastal communities. So this rise in temperature and its effect into the ocean acidification and ocean water expansion and ocean water temperature increases and sea level rise and all comes again as a bad impact. So a glacier in Asian Hindu Kush Himalaya, I think previous speakers also they talk about this, could lose up to 75% of their volume by century due to global warming. And also it causes flood and water shortage. Maybe short runs, we get flooding, but the long run, again, we get the water shortage for 240 million people who live in the mountainous region. So the warming ocean cause coral bleaching in Sri Lanka. It's Asia, and there are a lot of studies actually on this matter. Degradation of coral reef can affect about 4.5 million people in Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean. So then climate change risks to agriculture and food system in Asia will progressive with differentiated impact across the region. And climate change impact to decline in fisheries, aquaculture, crop production in South and Southeast Asia. Change in crop farming system and crop areas is almost all region with negative impacts to food security. So here heat waves in Asia recently, you can see this graphic map. April 2023, a record break in heat waves has affected many Asian countries, including India, Bangladesh, China, Thailand, and Vietnam. If you go through this here records, you can see Myanmar, Thailand, India, Bangladesh, Laos, Vietnam, and Philippines, China, Nepal, and Singapore, and Indonesia. All those countries, they got more than 40 Celsius degree. And both climate and non-climatic factors created water stress in water supply and demand in sub-region of Asia, except for North Asia. And also international transboundary river basins, Amu Darya and Indus and Ganges face severe water scarcity due to climate change, variability and change. It's a high confidence in IPCC report. So this is very good actually to do some research kind of things in future forecast, how climate change and variability can affect to the transboundary river basins. And also due to global warming, Asian countries could experience an increase in drought conditions 5 to 20% by end of this century. So this also high confidence results, IPCC noting down this Asian countries could, our all countries that included for that. And extreme climate events will increase impact on human health and well-being also, that in various magnitude across Asian countries. It is also having high confidence. And increases in heavy rain and temperature increase the risk of diarrhea, dengue fever, and malaria in tropical and subtropical Asia. And frequent hot days and intense heat waves will increase heat-related deaths. So this is actually now in future, I think we have to focus this also because of the climate change. The studies are rare. What is the relationship with the health impacts of climate change? I think after some years, we want to study this, even heat stress, heat stroke, kind of skin damage, kind of things are now appearing because of the heat waves. And also increased flood and drought will have adverse impacts on food availability and the price of food, and increase undernourishment in South and Southeast Asia. And also increased climate variability and extreme events. I think you know what is extreme events. Now we are experiencing drought, in sudden droughts, and then sudden floods, flash floods, storm intensity of the storm increasing. All those comes under extreme events, and longer term climate change will increase migration flow across Asia. This is another story actually, migration flow with the disasters. Most of the disasters are weather related, so flood, drought, and all those things. And therefore in future we have to think about that, that what we can do for the, what are the strategies for minimizing this migration flow across Asia. So, and countries like already Bangladesh, China, India, and the Philippines each record more than 4 million disaster displacement. So and Southeast and East Asia, Southeast Asia and East Asia, cyclone, floods, and typhoons triggered internal displacement. 9.6 million people, almost 30% of total global displacement in 2019. So climate change is already causing economic loss and damage across Asian regions, and this will increase under higher warming conditions. So this is one of the graphic global risk index ranking. This is 1998 to 2017, but this is actually continuously increased this situation. So we can see our countries, subcontinents, Indian subcontinents, and Asia and Southeast and South, and all countries are very vulnerable to climate change. Climate change impacts lower frequency of rain days and increased intensity. So the frequency may be lower, but increasing intensity is we can notice it. Even Sri Lanka, rainfall intensity is increasing. Lower frequency, increased intensity, increased rise of storm surge. Storm surge also another impact, increasing, and intensity is also increasing. And sea level rise 1 to 0.3 millimeters per year rise, and 10 to 30% increased risk of floods and increased risk of drought. So then coming to the loss and damage represent key knowledge gap, especially in West and Central and North Asia, because in our countries, these countries, insufficient literature, it's discriminating the loss and damage for future adaptation scenarios. So if we are not doing the, correct and advanced and reliable assessment, it will give the different picture. So coastal cities, especially in South and Southeast Asia, are expected to see significant increases in average annual economic loss between 2005 to 2050 due to flooding, with very high loss in East Asian cities under the high emission scenarios is very high confidence. And by 2080, 940 million to 1.1 billion urban dwellers in South and Southeast Asia could be affected by extreme heating lasting more than 30 days per year. High confidence, poor population affect the most. So we know that also heating, extreme heating, it will come to the, impacts are much more for the poor population. South Asia surface water and groundwater resources are already under stress now due to population growth and mismanagement of resources and economic development, poor governance and management. So all those things will be increased by climate change and drought. This is Sunday Times, Sunday, July 9th newspaper. You said fact sheet. Drought in Sri Lanka, the drought is increasing. The past 30 years drought have affected more than 6 million people in the country, and El Nino can result in warmer and drier than average conditions. So now everyone knows about this. Nowadays we are facing for the El Nino events. Now in the country as a whole, the number of consecutive dry days increase while the number of consecutive wet days reduce. So this will give, if we can forecast using these dry days and consecutive wet days, we can give very good picture actually regarding the drought. And recent analysis of the spatial pattern of rainfall indicate expansion of the dry zone in Sri Lanka. So, and ongoing droughts, 4 districts have already having the drought vulnerability, this Monragal and Wareli, Anuradhapura and Polonnaruwa. Now the districts, number of districts impacting due to droughts are increased now when I talk this time. So then global scientists predicting the warmest year as 2024, because Sri Lanka and Maha cultivation season also will be affecting because of this. Because, you know, basically we have 2 main cultivation seasons we call as Maha cultivation and Yala cultivation. So Maha cultivation basically depend on the rainfall. So especially for paddy farming. So in here, this is giving very bad forecast. Maha cultivation season is expected to be adversely impacted due to the onset of drought and to the El Nino effect. Now, ongoing El Nino effects definitely impact to the country's economy once again, because you know already the Sri Lanka is having a lot of issues now in this time, economic crisis already. When we face for this type of impacts due to the global warming and climate change, so you can understand what will happen. So WMO forecast there is a 90% of probability of the El Nino event continuing during the second half of the 2023. That means it will go up to maybe end of or 2025. We don't know. It will continue. So then. And national strategies and plans in Sri Lanka adaptation and national climate change policy. We have several policies, adaptation plan and impact in climate change impact in Sri Lanka 2015, and technology assessment action plan, and national communication climate change, and nation of climate change, and first national communication on climate change 2000, and now we are following this national adaptation plan for climate change impacts in Sri Lanka 2016 to 2025. As far as I know, I think this is the latest one. So maybe future we need to, we need to update this policy also, because now the new impacts are coming to the world, and so we have to adapt and we have to increase the strategies, improve the mitigation action and adaptation plan. So. And here you can see it's actually a disaster management cycle. We know it's once start, it's coming again to the same position, same disaster, because once start something disaster or hazard, again that comes again later stage and pre and post stage. Like that, when we increase the socioeconomic development, so it will also people use more energy and land use, mismanagement of the land use, then we emit in the lot of greenhouse gases emissions to the atmosphere, and as a result climate change, and then again climate impact. So therefore, now climate change impact assessment, we need to actually seek or need to identify, characterize, make out and project risks of impacts of climate change on how it's impact to the people and the community, infrastructure, economic activities, and ecosystem or natural resources. And this is economic impacts of climate change. The economic impacts of climate change vary geographically and difficult to forecast actually. The current economic forecast may seriously underestimate the effects of climate change and need for new models. So scientists say that rather than the previous model, now we have to introduce new models that give a more accurate picture of potential loss and damage. So in this picture, you can see global economic damage caused by each country's greenhouse gas emissions. The USA, the status of USA trillion US dollars, you can see, and China, Russia, India, Brazil, Indonesia, Japan, Venezuela, Germany, Canada, and UK. So due to time constraint, I am not going to explain everything. So given damage and loss in agriculture sector relative to combined industry, commerce, and tourism, you can see most contribution coming from the agriculture, 63%. And 73 industry and commerce and tourism. But again, damage and loss in agriculture as share of total damage and loss in all sector, it's again other sectors all come 74, but from agriculture contribute 26%. And then this is very interesting. I took from IPCC some other report. You can see India commodity-wise impacts, negative mix and positive impacts. Climate change impacts on agriculture leads to 1.5% loss in India's GDP by 2030. Rice and wheat are likely to see about 6 to 10% decrease in yield. So here you can see the red color, all it's noted as rice, wheat, maize, and sorghums as negative, and India commodity-wise impacts. For the potato, groundnuts, and coconut, it's a mixed impact. And here you can see other things also. And mustard also is a mixed impact. So here, when you come to this, here Southeast Asia, here East Asia, here Central Asia, and South Asia. Since we all, many of are coming from the South Asia, so you can see here what is happening, country and region here, the country India, Pakistan, like that. So then commodities, what are the commodities? Rice, wheat, kind of things here, cereals, wheat, again barley and maize, rice, like that. And increase of temperature this much. If temperature is increased by 1, 2, or 4, what will happen? The impacts on production yield. Here is, you can see the arrow mark. Here is the increase, and this side is the decrease. So there are many commodities are listed here as decreased amount. Is decreased by 2.62 and it's 2050. Here 10 to 30% decrease rice in India here, and here I can't see Hyderabad, I think, India. So then it is increased by 25 to 70. And here North India, rice increase by 230, and South India, rice. And likewise in Sri Lanka, here I can see rice decrease by 3.6 to 19.8 percentage. Is not simple. So even tea is our main drinking things. Tea, we depend on tea, many people, and it's 18 to 17%. It will negatively impact 2050. Like that, we have some other crops, commodities also, South Asia, and here. It's very interesting thing. We don't know whether this will happen or not, but these are very, very important to think about the whole our government sectors to give some kind of strategies, adaptation and mitigation strategies to face for these events. So South Asia is 10 times more exposed than Europe. European countries. So you can see here GDP at risk due to water stress and GDP at risk due to physical event, and GDP at risk due to heat waves. So here, South Asia, so all three categories here are percentage wise, we can see the GDP at risk to heat waves. You can see this graphic, this section, and at risk physical events are also increasing. So then other countries also, but you can see the South Asia is compared to other regions, it's high impacts. So here new studies, 135 countries estimate that 4% of global annual economic output could be lost by 2050 because of climate change. And lower income, lower middle income countries are more likely to face GDP losses, with South Asia most at risk. So we have to be prepared then, because this we can rely, we have some kind of confidence of the IPCC report, and over 60 countries could have their credit rating cut by 2030 due to global warming. And you can see this graphic, global temperature changes increasing and due to climate change as a function of temperature change. Climate damage as percentage of global economy. So it's having very good relationship. So here, coming to coastal cities in South and Southeast Asia are expected to increase in average annual economic losses between 2005 to 50 due to flooding, with very high losses in East Asian cities under the high emissions scenario, high confidence given for this. And here we know global economic losses associated with weather-related disasters, because you know weather-related, or we can say hydrometeorological disasters are the most disasters in the contribution. More than 70%, I think, are based on the hydrometeorological events. So therefore, the global economic losses associated with mostly weather-related disasters. So it is also, I mean, you can see the increases. And here, the side effects of air conditioning because of gross domestic electricity consumption forecast, given again here one of the forecast 2026. And Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam gross domestic electricity consumption forecast. Due to various factors, maybe for use in industries, and you can see here Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Singapore, their contribution and forecast to 2026. And it will give some kind of side effects also for air conditioning. Now it is increasing, I mean, everywhere. Even now the houses, many people, when they design the houses in warm areas, they used to put the air condition. So then consume a lot of energy day by day. It is increasing and harmful to the environment and can cause health problems and high electricity consumption. So all those things will be increasing. Climate change has caused direct losses due to the damage of infrastructure. So Asia, you know, infrastructure damage, storm surge and flooding, and due to cyclones and kind of things, it's agricultural damage and infrastructure damage. So infrastructure gap in Asia, here is a gap, the powers and communication gap, here transportation and water and sanitation. Baseline estimating here the blue color, and climate adjusted estimate, even after adjusted, some gap is there. So urban development adaptation across Asia, infrastructure adaptation, flood protection measures, climate resilience highways, some kind of adaptation measures, sustainable land use planning and nature ecosystem based solution and technological solution, behavioral adaptation, because we need to know, I mean, many people, they don't know what is happening. Normal people, they don't know about the climate change and I mean global warming and kind of things. But we should have some kind of awareness system to go this message to every people. So then El Nino will very likely materials in the coming months, probability of very high southern oscillation. You can see 2023, it's already forecasted. Now we are actually in this El Nino event. Severe weather and climate related extreme events are expected to intensify further the economic losses in future. So here some of the kind of graphics here: meteorological events, hydrological events, climatological events, and here you can see all these things are weather related, atmospheric related, meteorological, hydrological, and climatological. 30 years moving average. Here the linear trends is increasing. So yes, I will not go everything. And what are the options? So we as earlier speaker said, Dr. Jabir, so we have mitigation and adaptation both. So we have our all, I mean, as a whole Asian countries, climate smart agriculture, integrated approach to manage landscape, cropland, livestock, forest, and fisheries, to enhance good security, food security, and here is around food security and Internet of Things. We now already, I think India is using so much than our countries. Agriculture here, the Internet of Things, drones for field monitoring and water management, soil monitoring sensor using that soil temperature, humidity like that, and machine for routine operations. So I think here you can see drone technology is used in not only for mapping, for other many things that can be used. And the ecosystem-based DRR is another thing, nature-based solution for resilience. Now I think UN4DR and UNISDR also, and the Sendai framework for action also, I think Hugo framework for action also, highlighting this kind of ecosystem resilience, nature-based solution for ecosystem act as a buffer against hazard, preventing disaster and reducing disaster impact on people and critical infrastructure and basic services. So here we can see ecosystem-based, what are the mitigation, ecosystem, people, and climate change should have a very good interaction. So positive and negative impact, adaptation for biodiversity and ecosystem-based adaptation. You can see reforestation, forest creation in unsuitable areas is negative, and river restoration, wetland restoration. Actually, nowadays we can see, I mean, India and Bangladesh, all other countries, in Sri Lanka, we had a very good wetlands resources, but now we cannot see all disappearing because of the infrastructure development, economic development, urbanization, all the wetlands destroying. So this now it's, I mean, we can see the impacts very nicely when the urban areas, Colombo and other areas, because of this wetlands destruction, even small amount of rainfall we get floods. So then protection and expansion of natural, semi-natural areas and increased connectivity, species translocation, natural fire regime restoration, like kind of things are there. We can, and evidence of effectiveness of urban ecosystem-based adaptation in Asia. So here we can see the risk, extreme heat, urban heat islands. Ecosystem-based option, we can give as an option urban park, green space, and the risk reduction, ecosystem benefits. You can see this circle here is high. Confidence is very high. Risk reduction is very high for extreme heat and urban heat islands. So risk reduction is very high. So establishing, building the urban park and green spaces. So ecosystem benefits also medium. So you see here is this, and ecosystem benefits, economic benefits are low, but even then human well-being is very high, human well-being. So then like that flooding, ecological stormwater management is risk reduction is very high, and ecosystem benefits also very high. So then sea level rise, mangroves restoration, you can see medium risk reduction, ecosystem benefit is very high, and human well-being also very good for sea level rise here. And food insecurity, urban agriculture. I think urban agriculture is very, very good in India, as I know, Tamil Nadu and some other areas. I mean, you are doing very well that urban agriculture in Sri Lanka also practicing now, but not in that level. These are the things that actually, I mean, to mitigate or to adaptation options that we can take. And invest in urban blue-green infrastructure. I think it's a very famous now combination of infrastructure, ecological restoration, and urban design to connect people with nature. Blue indicates water bodies such as rivers and tanks. So here, as I said, wetlands conservation is a must, I think. And so rainwater harvesting is another option, but I mean, even though policies and other documents highlighted, but that implementation, when we talk about the implementation side, is very weak. I don't know that where that gap is, who will address all these things. And constructed wetlands and urban agriculture, sponge gardens and green roof, and also urban green spaces and permeable pavements. Here it's permeable pavements. And nowadays we can see everywhere. So we can see impermeable land cover everywhere, cement and everything. But you can actually, in Europe countries, even there are city areas like university areas and all, they don't put all the things in cement cover. So they have kind of with grasses and kind of mechanism to infiltrate water into the soil. And so those kind of mechanism we also can practice. And adaptation, there are so many books available in the internet. I don't know whether sometimes free download, and sometimes we can purchase to the libraries. Adaptation to changing climate, adjusting to actual or expected future climate. The goal is to reduce our risk from the harmful effects of climate change. So the cost of climate change, this graphic, avoided damage up to 2050, given some kind of predictions, and total cost of climate change after adaptation. We can see here how much, and net benefits of adaptation and gross benefits of adaptation. So I will skip that mitigation. Earlier speaker also, I think this graphic he has taken from, I think, IPCC. And here minimize the greenhouse gas emission in key sectors of the economy, promoting the use of renewable energy and low carbon fuels, energy efficiency improvement. This is the most, I mean, difficult task now in the world. Many countries are still using fossil fuels. It is, even though, I mean, we all are talking about the climate change and impacts and economic impacts and all, but still using fossil fuel is the problem actually to minimizing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So yes, here is one of the things that I have taken. Global temperature rises will negatively impact GDP in all regions by mid-century. So here we can see, even if we go to the Paris Agreement, here a world, it will negatively impact 4.2. Here, if we go to the Paris Agreement, even Paris Agreement is saying keeping the Celsius 2 degree less than 2. So here, Asian countries, here you can see Asia 5.5. The even 11, if further mitigating action are taken under 2 Celsius scenario, even then 11 percentage, and even 2.6 scenario mitigating action with that, GDP will goes down 14%. This is, I mean, very, very dangerous. 3.2 increases of Celsius degree. It is, you see 18% negatively impact. So below, therefore now we are at least trying to go to the Paris Agreement now. Every country is our, all, even Asian and other Europe countries and everywhere. So even 2 is very 4 negatively impact. The impact of climate change has been forecasted to be the hardest hit for Asian economies. So with 5.5 hit to GDP in the best case scenario and 26.5 hit in severe case scenario. So here is the very, very dangerous percentage if we go beyond that level. So economic losses from extreme weather rockets in Asia 14 November 2022, more than 100 natural hazard events in Asia, 80% were flood and storm events, almost 4,000 fatalities. So then 48.3 billion people were directly affected by the hazard, causing total economic damage this much, US dollars 35.6 billion. And 2021 flooding caused the highest economic losses in China, India, and Thailand. So you can see the amount. So economic losses and storm also caused significant economic damage or loss India and China and Japan. So it will give us, I mean, storm impacts are very, very very vulnerable, so that we can get that idea, because its economic damage is high, means so India and China and Japan. Again, in China, India, and Thailand, and that is because of the flood. Climate change danger to South Asia's economy, 19 August 2014, one, assessing the cost of climate change and adaptation in South. Because even 2014, now we are getting the impacts. Actually, the report predicted that by 2050, the collective economy of 6 countries, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, will lose an average 1.8 of its annual gross domestic products, right into 88.8 by 2100. So world economic situation and prospects as of mid-2019 report, the region has an estimated 400 million people living in extreme poverty below the threshold of 1.90 USD per day. So this is the very sad things that we can see. The Asia climate-related disasters have become more recurrent and destructive in terms of both economic and social impacts. But ATL and HATL, they say they also contributed to the IPCC report, and they are saying that Asia climate-related disasters have become more recurrent and destructive in terms of both economic and social impacts. So thank you very much. I thought that I have not taken so much of time, so maybe more than 30 given, but I have taken maybe more than 30, 35, 40 or something like that.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this very informative and thought-provoking presentation. The floor is now open to questions from all the participants. Once again, I would like to remind you can type in your questions in the Q&A box. You can use the chat box, or you can raise your hands. Also, we have a couple of questions from the previous session as well. So if we have Dr. Jabir Syed ji with us,
Yes, please.
so would you like to take these questions now?
Yes, can you please repeat the question if possible?
Yes, sir. Not an issue, sir. So, sir, Yamini Khandelwal ji has asked, what are some of the national level programs and actions to combat climate change in Pakistan? And should I proceed with the second question, sir?
Yeah, okay. I would like to answer question 1.
Okay, sir.
Firstly.
Sure, sir.
So definitely government of Pakistan, we have initiated many programs to combat the climate change issue in Pakistan. And the most important one was billion tree tsunami to increase the number of, forest areas in the countries. And then we have also introduced climate finance unit in Ministry of Climate Finance, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Climate Change, and both at federal level and in the provincial level as well, to seek some of the and to reach some of the climate finances available from different donors in the world. And then again, I must say that we have almost provided 30% of the total development funding and the research funding to the project related to the climate change adaptation and resilience, mainly from the IT sector, from the agriculture sector, and under the China-Pakistan economic corridor, 50% of the research funding we have um, designated those funds for the climate smart agriculture practices and climate smart agriculture related interventions in the country. So definitely our government, they are trying to um, uh, finance these kind of projects. And what kind of the second question, can you please repeat?
Sure, sir. So second question is from Professor Priyanka Puriji. She's asking, drought hazard has shown in the map does not indicate any specific geographic pattern for the country. There are clusters as observed with exceptional areas in these clusters. Are there any specific reasons operating for this?
Yes, I agree with a respectable professor. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, and I have shown in the map that few parts of the southern Pakistan, specifically from Balochistan and from the Sindh province, due to their geographical location, uh, I agree that it cannot be designated that those areas can be the drought prevalence areas in the country. But in the meanwhile, definitely it's true that in the last year, those areas have received a lot of precipitation in those areas as well. And those areas have faced a lot of disaster due to the flash floods, starting from the middle part of the Balochistan province and the upper parts of Sindh province. So it's difficult, and the main problem was this, that those areas were not ready to receive that kind of rainfall. And as we have also all speakers have mentioned in their presentation, that if we have climate resilient infrastructure to face these kind of events, definitely it would be helpful to address this kind of situation and these kind of emergencies. And there is another question, that what is the scope for Pakistan and India to cooperate on the issue of climate change? What is the possibility of the same? What areas can cooperate? So as I mentioned in my presentation, that firstly, we can cooperate on the transboundary pollution issues, especially in both Punjab, Indian Punjab and Pakistani Punjab. Both parts in these countries, we are facing some of the smoke related challenges in the urban part and even in the rural part of these areas. And on the other side, we can also, although we have already agreements and we have cooperation on water issues as well, we can also strengthen our ties on the water related issues as well, because these are the two sectors. I mean, the agriculture one, because we usually say that in the parts of central part of Pakistan and Indian Punjab, we have some issues from the agricultural burning residues, and we can cooperate on these things to combat the issue of climate change in subcontinent. Yeah. Any other question?
Thank you so much, sir. I do not see any questions in the Q&A or chat box either. And if any of the participants would like to raise their hands and ask the questions, they are more than welcome to. We can wait for a couple of minutes, I guess, to let the questions come in. Any questions regarding either of the sessions you can ask? We'll be waiting for a couple of minutes. In the meantime, anybody has question, chat box is open, Q&A box is open, and you can raise your hands. Since we do not have any further questions, yes, I don't see any in either of the boxes or the raised hands. I think we can proceed with the formal vote of thanks. Last time, I would like to ask anybody, any questions? Okay. One minute more and then we'll be concluding the session. Okay, since we do not have any questions, I think it's safe to presume we can end the session with a formal vote of thanks. As we come to the end of day 2 of understanding the nuances of climate change in the Indian subcontinent, impact and way forward, an online international monsoon school program, a 6-week immersive online introductory certificate training course organized by IMPRI, I, Priyanka Negi, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of the IMPRI Center of Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development, New Delhi. We are grateful to our experts for the day 2 sessions, Professor Joyashree Royji, Dr. Jabir Syed ji, and Professor Rekha Nianthi ji for taking out their valuable time and for their thought-provoking insights on the topics. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. Readings for the session have been shared in your email, and a video of the session will also be shared with you for learning. We look forward to welcoming you for our third day of this certification course on the 19th of August at 3 p.m. The theme for day 3 is observable calamities due to climate change, and the experts are Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, Professor Anil K. Gupta, Dr. Riazul Ehsan, and Mr. KJ Joy. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in the future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a very good evening. Thank you.